Now, you're very welcome along to the Sunday Paper Review. In studio, we have the Sunday Independent sports editor, John Greene, and we have Mick Foley from the Sunday Times. I will take you through your Sunday back pages firstly. So, the Sunday Times here have Alison, who wasn't so hot yesterday. Alison in Blunderland is a very good headline. Liverpool beat Leicester 2-1. Stay top despite £66 million keeper's mistake. Bottom left here, battle for Rice. That's Declan intensifies. And then Mick Foley here on the front page. Dubs set for date with Destiny. Jose as well, also making the front page. We're not good enough to play the United way, is Jose's take on things. Sunday Mirror. The Kyle High Club after his brilliant goal yesterday for City. And then Small to do. I'm not sure Dublin do have it all to do, but John Small insists that past All-Ireland wins count for nothing. And the task at hand is all that matters today. So sticking to the process and saying the right things, John Small. Sunday Independent. Football's final chance is the loaded headline there. Can Tyrone upset the odds and end Dubs' dominance? And then Jose, I knew we were in trouble. This is Jose Mourinho doing the rounds today, saying he knew early on in the season, across the summer, that Manchester United weren't set to compete this year. The Star then, Jeepers Keepers. This is Alison again, who, in fairness to him, does say, I'm not stupid. This will not happen again. I'm angry at myself for the mistake that put the team in a difficult position. I wanted to keep playing, keep possession. I'm not going to be stupid and make the same mistake. And then a special hunch. Jose certain of a difficult season again. It's Jose saying that he warned Ed Woodward early in the year that things were not going to go well this year for Manchester United. Then we have the Sunday World. Interesting here in the bottom left is Paul McGrath in his column today. I'll talk to Declan Rice is what McGrath's offering to do. And then knocking on heaven's door. It's blue skies above for Gavin's Dubs. It's the All-Ireland final again. On the back page of the Mail on Sunday, Croker set to rock. Picture of Dean. Tyrone gear up for game of their lives. And then Philip Quinn here with Gareth Southgate quotes, who says that he has spoken to Declan Rice, but has made no promises to him. He said it would be unethical to promise Rice the world, so he hasn't done that. And then Sun Sport, I warned you. Again, it's Jose to Ed Woodward. Jose gets his excuses in early. So they are your back pages, lads. Thanks for coming in. And All-Ireland final day. A spring in your step is how Michael Foley described his morning. Extra little spring on All-Ireland final day.
Well, it was spring in the step for All-Ireland hurling final day, Joe. Yeah. I got a bit confused on the way up. I was surprised then when I opened the papers, found no hurling in them. So I'm not sure what's going on. It seems to be a football game on or something, is it?
This is actually a loaded headline, isn't it? Football's final chance. Are we thrown it out with the bathwater here if we don't get a final to save the season like we've had maybe in the last 2 or 3 years almost?
I don't know. It's like, football's final chance. I suppose there's such a feeling around the summer all the way along, like that it's been a bad year for football and the game is in turmoil and there's problems and there's crisis and there's a hell of a lot of weight to that and there's a hell of a lot to be discussed around that. But we were only saying outside like it's sort of like you've got almost a couple of different debates going on. For example, if you go down to Carlow and ask them how's their football summer been like.
Magical.
Great.
Yeah.
Best we've had in however long, Go down to Wicklow, they won a game, for the first time in however long. Like, if you drill down into it, you'll find plenty of happy places with football. But I suppose when you're looking at it, almost as though actually you're in the press box and looking down on the whole field and you're looking at it and going,
looking
where
at
are
it from
we?
the top deck of the Hogan stand.
Yeah, where are we, like, and there is issues around how the game is played. I don't think there's any issues, from my point of view anyway, there's no issues whatsoever with the current champions, and if they win a 4 in a row, I'd have absolutely no, I would not say that Dublin are anywhere next nor near the problem with football right now.
Yeah.
But moving beyond that, I think there's real scope for debate now about rule change, about how the game is played, and most importantly of all, how the GA itself wants the game to be played, and to work back from that point. And what do they want? But this is also like the first thing we're talking about on All-Ireland football final day is the state of the game. I mean, compare that to even if you didn't have a great hurling championship season, you wouldn't be talking about the state of the game. You'd be talking about the event and the whole, what it means to everybody and all the rest of it. And I think it's important to remember that too, that for everybody from Dublin, Tyrone and beyond, today, regardless of how the game is being played or how the game is being perceived, today is a hugely emotional day. It's a huge day in every which way for them,
It's a very fair point to make, and I've just been guilty of it. I suppose if it was Mayo in the final today, we'd be straight into, can't wait. So there is an element here across the papers of half-hearted previews. I mean, people are mustering a case, maybe a case for Tyrone, and then they're rounding off their piece by saying, but obviously that's not going to happen.
It's been a long summer too, Joe. You know, if there's any ennui there, it's possibly because everything's been crammed into 3 weeks less than normal. But I mean, look at
for the record, I scanned. Not one person is tipping Tyrone.
Yeah, I couldn't find anyone.
No, there'll be nobody tonight who can say I told you.
No, there won't be. But there will be. If Tyrone do win, I think there'll be. You can definitely expect to hear somebody saying at 5 o'clock, "Well, we proved everybody wrong today."
Somebody said to me, you know, he said, I wouldn't be shocked if they won it, but I'd be surprised. Right, okay. I said that's an interesting.
Was this Kerry man who said this?
No, it actually wasn't. It wasn't. I won't give away their origins now, because that might, what would you call it, spin the conversation a bit. But like it was an interesting way to look at it, because you can see ways they can win. It's just that I can't see them winning. You know?
I think
wouldn't it be truly dreadful if in a final you literally couldn't see one way for one team to win in a 2-horse race?
Well, that would be a problem. Yeah.
I think nothing sums the gloominess up more than Mark O'Shea's final line in his column in the Mail, when he says that a victory for Tyrone in football would be if they can make a game of it, so that we can look forward to possibly having a championship in 2019.
Yeah.
It's pretty grim.
That kind of captures the mood.
It does capture it, yeah.
Colin O'Rourke makes an interesting observation. I wonder, is this true? And he said, one of the strange things about some champions is they become even more popular with success. And he talks about Federer in tennis. He talks about Woods and how golf is craving his return. Muhammad Ali, obviously, says in racing, Anthony McCoy kept winning, grew increasingly popular. So too Frankie Dettori. Most of the time, he says, the same applies to the All Blacks in rugby. There are plenty of others. And he says the present Dublin team are similar. Most GAA supporters generally like to see a new team taking down a county which is dominating, but I don't get that sense to any great degree with Dublin. There is admiration for their quality, athleticism, and perhaps most of all their approach to the game itself and their respect for what the GAA stands for. Agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, in general terms, yeah.
In general terms, yeah, I'd have to say that there's you always get that anti-Dublin thing in the GAA. There's always been the culty city thing with it. And, you know, there'll be people who'll be rooting for Tyrone today just because they're the underdog, and that tends to be something that we do in sport. But whether it's grudging or not, there is a lot of admiration for what Dublin have done, a lot of admiration, and from teams that have been on the end of absolute hidings from them. You can't just look past how honest they are as a group and what they're doing. They're doing nothing wrong. They're probably still the most enjoyable. You know, now that Mayo have fallen by the wayside this year, they are the most enjoyable team to watch playing, and I think there is a grudging respect. And if you have a Mead man saying that, then
you're in real trouble.
You know,
that's where the game is in real trouble.
Yeah.
Like when Mead men are respecting Dublin.
Yeah,
but like, I think there's a lovely little bit in Dermot Crowe's piece about Jim Gavin this morning, where he just has this little thing about Anton O'Toole being brought in to talk to the players and just being introduced, and what Anton O'Toole did being explained to them, and then a little kind of montage of what he did in his career and so on and so forth. And it's just the way Gavin is talking in it. And Dermot makes a point that it's Gavin unguarded, really, you know, insofar as he's even unguarded in front of his own players. But what came across to me, and I don't think it's contrived, it was genuine, it was real, it was sincere, and it was warm. And you could see how, in that little bit, you can see how the Dublin players have been connected to all aspects of what football is about, including the legacy aspect and what it means to be a Dub. And that feeds back into the humility and the lack of arrogance that I think people like about them, which is kind of, and not to be disrespectful to previous Dublin teams, but you know, the arrogance, I suppose, that you would, as a country person, you would have assumed to be with Dublin isn't necessarily as strong.
A lot of losing Dublin teams in the recent past would have had a lot more swagger about them.
Absolutely,
than this winning Dublin team has.
But you have a team, like just in that little story, like you have a group of young lads and Anton O'Toole is standing in front of him, and it's being explained who this man is and why he's here and why he's important, and these men are like, we all have a commonality here and we're all part of the same moving thing. And I think that's huge. And it was sometimes we kind of get a bit bogged down, maybe in the media in particular, about how Gavin's public persona and how they engage with the media, which is very controlled, quite distant, and it is what it is. But sometimes and this is why it's good to get little bits and pieces out like that, because you kind of remember why this guy is a great manager, why this is a great team, and what helps to make a great team, you know. It's not that they have to give away the secrets of the universe, but it's just that to me was a lovely little thing, just to pull you back into reality and go, geez, yeah, that's what being great is about now. That's what being great is
an
about.
Interesting postscript to that. This was a video that came out on social media during the week, which doesn't look like it was supposed to have come out. It was filmed by somebody in the group that was in the room, and it is a very interesting look at Dublin behind the scenes and how different they actually are when the guard is down a little, and the way they're talking. And if you go to look for that video now, it's been removed from YouTube.
Yeah, I went to look for it. I couldn't find it.
And it's been removed due to a copyright complaint by the Dublin media manager.
Clever.
So it was a little window, and the window has been closed.
Yeah.
And you don't get many of those with Dublin.
And what was the bar?
And it is frustrating for for all the respect and admiration we have for Dublin, for us on this side of the thing, just trying to get that across to people, be it on television or radio or in newspapers. It's very difficult to kind of get that across what they're like.
Do you remember last year when the Gavin stuff blew up again, and then a video emerged of him at some club or other? It might have been his home club.
It was his home club in Clondalkin.
He just gave a beautiful speech about what it meant to him and his parents, and you saw a bit like having O'Toole in, who won 4 All-Irelands and 8 Leinsters back in the day, last played in I think 84. There's like a real sentimental side.
Most of them weren't born when Anthony O'Toole last played.
Absolutely. So, and it meant a lot to him, I think, to be brought in and have what he did recognised. Like I haven't seen the video, but it says he almost stood there slightly embarrassed to be lauded by Gavin.
I think.
I believe so, yeah.
But there's also a little insight in Dermot's piece about just the weekend that they went to Clare, and the 2 things kind of stood out for me in that they went to they trained in Kilmehel in County Clare and were very generous to the people, and they left a very good impression on the locals. So the training session was behind closed doors, and then they opened up to use the local GA pitch. And then they let people in and they chatted and did a session with them and stuff. And the report back from one of the people who was there to Dermot was how ordinary they were. Which I thought was very interesting, and of course, why wouldn't they be ordinary? They should be ordinary.
They are ordinary, yeah.
We tend to mythologise about Dublin a little bit because we get so little access to them. But the other interesting point, and he doesn't mean it as the guy is quoted. He certainly doesn't mean it as a criticism, and it's not intended as it. But it's just a matter of fact statement. He says they were very generous with their time. Their schedule allowed 30 or 40 minutes with us. And that's what they gave us. That they were working to their timetable, and their timetable obviously said 40 minutes with local club people, and then they were gone.
This is a long piece that Dermot's done. What is it? What are we talking
It's
words?
over 4,000 words, yeah.
Okay, so I mean, there's different people he's spoken to. There's the video. He talks to Tomas Brady, who played or was in around the squad for a while, who only really had pretty good things to say about Gavin, and lads on the fringes often don't. And then he speaks to Anthony Daly, which is kind of interesting as well, and was a really good idea.
Yeah,
it's a brilliant idea. It's probably the most interesting quote of the whole thing, where Daly talks about doing Q&As with him that AIG may have organised, and doesn't give much away, and very nice and very pleasant, or says that I've never had a crossword with Jim. Anytime we meet, we had great old chats about West Clare. Obviously Gavin's parents are both from West Clare, but while I would have had more rows with Gilroy when Gilroy was in charge, I would have had longer chats about teams and even sharing advice. There was something of an open book about Pat, and I'm not saying that in a way being critical about Jim. And he talks later on that
you might go for a pint with
you'd have a pint with Gilroy,
Pat, but he's never gone for a pint with
very pleasant, he says, but you always felt he was never going to give much away. Gilroy more personable. Not a criticism, but that was Daly's experience of the two.
But it's all part of that mythologising thing that you mentioned there, I think, anyway, like the keeping the distance between them and what the public actually know about what they're doing and about them as people as well. I think that's all. It's obviously very deliberate, and I think the reason is that the less you know about them, the more inclined your opposition are to go, these guys, the players anyway, they're kind of supermen, because we don't really know, because they're not presented to us as normal, in inverted commas, people, they're presented to us as these all-conquering footballing men machines, you know.
Yeah.
There's also a thing around the collective that seems to be at the core of everything he does, and by allowing personality to come out through the media or whatever, or even on the football pitch, that takes away from
dilutes
the idea of creating a collective.
And it's all perception, like, you know, it's just a diluted perception. And the interesting thing is, like, he's up against a manager today who I remember very, very well, and we're going back 10 years ago or 11 years ago now, but back when Tyrone were winning All-Irelands, like 03, 05, 08, like, the following Sunday was always great because everybody's phone was on. They would tell you everything, what they did hour to hour in the run up to the game, like everything. There was nothing off the table. And I remember asking Mickey Hart one time about why do you do that? Like, I mean, why do you do that? He said, because he said whatever we did this year is now redundant. He said we're moving on, and if anyone's interested in what we did last year, good luck to them. We've moved on. We've evolved ourselves to another level of preparation, you know. But that day is long gone now, gone with the dodo, you know. But it's nice while it lasted.
Daly is another good quote as well. He says, you know the way you're always worried about players and the extended panel may be talking. This is about the media stuff as well. I heard Gavin's nearly as strong in the backroom staff, even over pillow talk. Nothing comes out. The thought of Gavin saying, even over pillow talk. Not a word.
But you even think about kind of in the Gavin era, there's been two decent books, two very good books from people involved in the camp, Philly McMahon and Jason Sherlock. Nothing given away there either.
No. You see little bits. There was a lad, Paddy Quinn, was that his name? He played
the
Tyrone man. He kind of popped up in a few places this week, and Tomas Brady there now. There's Dennis Batstick, I suppose, has been doing a little bit here and there. He did a bit. Talked to Dennis about Paul Mannion and Sonny Tyne.
Yeah, but like it's all bits. Low level.
Oh, it's low level. Yeah, you're only like at this point in the thing, you're only kind of, you know, threading together very small threads and hoping for something more as time goes on.
Yeah,
you know.
You mentioned Philly McMahon there. Philip Lanigan has a nice reference to him in his intro. Dubs rising up to a high watermark, and again, it's a general preview as much as anything. But on Philly, I hadn't realised this. So Philly had decided to do something for the local community, and he's done it with the Ballymun Whitehall partnership. And the Dublin defender wanted to draw on his own personal knowledge of running personal fitness courses to target young people in that part of the city. The criteria was you have to be 18 to 24. You had to have been on social welfare for longer than a year. The Department of Social Protection rubber stamped it, and they had 20 full-time places available, and it ran for the full year. And the name of the course was Philly McMahon's Kaizen Evolution.
Yeah.
Kaizen, as I'm sure you know, Mick,
yes,
is Japanese for continual improvement, a philosophy that struck a chord with the player.
I don't think there's any accurate, actual, precise English translation of Japanese, Joe, but you're in the right place.
Close enough.
There.
Okay.
Close enough.
So that's, I mean, I hadn't realised Philly McMahon was involved in that.
Well, I'm not a bit surprised, because if you've read his book, he seems to be
very engaged.
Absolutely engaged in his community, but also he seems to have an entrepreneurial spirit. He seems to be able to come up with good ideas and then get them up and running, be it at a business level or at a community level.
Yeah, or as a footballer.
You
know what I mean? Because I mean, he would have had to come from a fair way back to make himself the player he was. So I mean, he's had direct experience of that. The interesting thing to me, you know, we're talking here about, you know, Dublin, and we're talking about them as footballers, but really we're talking about them as the kind of people they are, and sort of how the two link together in that. And the interesting thing to me is, you know, you go back 15 years. This is where this was the sort of Tyrone template. When Hart was starting out, this idea of good footballers but also good people, you know, and sort of trying to blend the two, that the both went hand in hand, and you kind of see it. You could argue that was probably the beginning of that very conscious idea. And you know, it's interesting now that we now have, you know, Dublin at this heightened, you know, maybe the greatest team of all time, and part of the reason they're the greatest team of all time is because of this heightened state where the person and the footballer have to go hand in hand in terms of their personalities and their abilities. This is something that Tyrone would have started in 2003. And now we're here 15 years later waiting to see, well, can Tyrone come around that?
I always think with sport, at any level, it doesn't matter what, you know, if you're coaching kids or you're doing a county team or you're coaching a national team, okay, it's about what you're doing, which is to make a team to win a game and to win the next game. But I think you have a duty as a coach or as a manager to give people skills and lessons and values which
for life,
go outside of that. And Tomas Brady touches on that. You know, he's in the development game in Hollywood of all places at the moment. And
that's LA as opposed to County Down now.
And he talks about stuff that he learned when he was a Dublin panellist, which he now uses in his business life and in his personal life. And I think that, you know, we should be mindful of the fact that when you're involved with sport, that it is part of something else. It is part of, you know, a greater thing, that you are the person that you are. And if you're a coach, especially with young people, that you have a responsibility to try and be a good person around them, and to try and help them to find a way as well.
Kev is watching because we're streaming on Facebook as well. Anyone outside the two counties involved really care who wins? TV figures are going to be interesting.
Well, it's a sellout today. Which there was a bit of there was a little bit of discussion whether it might or not be. So we'll see. We'll see what the TV is.
I think All-Ireland football final day, regardless of who's in it or what it is, or the fact that, you know, hardly anybody give Tyrone a chance of winning this match. It's still All-Ireland football day, and it's still very much part of who we are as a nation, and I'm really looking forward to it. I look forward to the All-Ireland final every year, and I have done for a long time.
Paul Galvin makes the point, and I wasn't actually aware that this was going on. I don't think this is a big thing, but he says there has been some commentary, in fairness, he says just some commentary over the summer about the state of football, as if Dublin are somehow to blame for this, which is neither fair nor true in my book. He says, true, the game isn't great to watch at times, it's risk-free sport at the moment, but it's not Dublin's responsibility to give the rest of the country a product we can all enjoy just because they're winning. They have elevated the game in some ways, and while the style of play isn't spellbinding, it shouldn't be viewed negatively. There has been this transition from Dublin into spellbinding, into almost more of a tiki-taka control. Enda McHenry talked about how they've almost taken the chance out of the game. It's a controlled game, it's a controlled match. There's almost a deadness to it in some ways, as opposed to the ball bouncing around.
Well, I think that's probably what's fresh in our memories, because nobody has put it up to them so far this year. You know, when Mayo put it up to them last year, the year before, you know, I think, you know, it's a bit like, you know, when Kenny were at their best, you bring whatever you can to the fight, and they'll match you, and they'll beat you that way. And, you know, like I mentioned today in the paper about the closing stages of last year's All-Ireland final. I mean, the stadium was absolutely rocking, and there has been an undercurrent this summer of, you know, Dublin's dominance has been bad for football. I mean, you know, the other side of the argument is, if we didn't have Dublin now, you know, what would we have?
What state would it be in?
You know, we would. Like, this is when Kerry came along and won Handy All Irelands, when there was nothing else happening. You know,
like, I mean, it's such a, and I've heard it knocked around, like, I mean, this thing that they're kind of, I wouldn't say, I don't think it's been said that they're boring to watch, but that, you know, the heat's gone out of them, and definitely they're playing with their heads more than their hearts now. That's for sure. But they're, like John says, they're being allowed to play with their heads most of the time.
They weren't boring to watch in the All-Ireland final last
year.
Hell
no. Like, I mean, the notion that Dublin are brought into any debate about the state of the game in a negative way is ludicrous in my view.
Agreed.
Like, no one, I mean, seriously, like, you know. I mean, look at the way they played. Okay, maybe they hand passed the ball more than they did last year or whatever, but they're playing in a way that's so good. I mean, Paul has another line, I thought it was a great line, I have to say, and I thought it said an awful lot about where the game is at, and that he says that Dublin have been so relentlessly good, they make the game look bad. And I think that goes to a hell of a lot of what the entire debate is about. That Dublin are playing a 21st century style of football that's really good, but they're making the game, as it's currently constituted, look bad. They've almost gone to almost a postmodern level now, in terms of like how they want to play the game, how they see to play the game. But I think a very key thing, as you said there, John, is they're being allowed to do it. Mayo don't allow them to do it, you see a different Dublin. And I'd say you might see a different Dublin today as well.
Yeah,
the obliged to play differently.
Hopefully, yeah. Eamon Donoghue was the first person I saw during the week in the Irish Times with the stat, and it's in a few places today that they haven't had a shot from outside the 45, like attempted a shot outside the 45 all summer, Dublin. Just kind of an extraordinary new development, really. Like, that's never happened, I'm sure, in the history of GA before.
Well, very unlikely it has. I mean, they just haven't had to, you know?
Because against Galway, there was no outstanding point where everyone went, oh my God, what a score. And yet every score was just so good.
There's a thing it happens, it particularly happens in their Leinster Championship matches, where when you go to a Leinster Championship match now, it's very hard not to mentally switch off for a while. So you come out, you Dublin win 6 points up at half-time against some team, and they come out and you haven't really kind of got really going in the second half, and 10 minutes are gone in the second half, and 6 points has become 12 points, and you've got, what's after happening there? When did that happen? Where did those 6 points come from? It's just
dead by a thousand cuts, like, you know.
Yeah, Joe Brolly pointed out their shot conversion was 80%. in the Galway game, and Tyrone were at about 30% against Monaghan, so that's a big enough gap to try and close. In terms of feature interviews,
another stat. I think it may have been their Super 8 game where they took a similar amount of shots in the mid-20s each, and again Dublin's conversion rate was so much higher
from where they're taking them, isn't it?
Yeah, it's historic all-time.
In terms of like previews, Paul Gavin, before you move off him, I really liked. Just when you come down to that hard graft of when you have a columnist in to say how they think or why they think the game is going to be won, or everybody is going for Dublin, and his point, and Colin O'Rourke makes a similar point in a different way, is apart from the fact that Dublin are just better than Tyrone are at the moment, Gavin takes it a step further and he has a very good finishing line. He says Dublin have been planning for this longer than Tyrone have, and that's everyone is talking about, is Mickey Hart going to pull a rabbit out of the hat? And maybe he will. He's got a fantastic record in finals. It's very hard sitting here a couple of hours before throw-in to see what that rabbit is going to be and how really it's going to make that much of a difference.
It's not so much the rabbit, it's how much of an impact the rabbit can have when he hops over the hat.
The one thing everyone seems to be agreed on is that Tyrone have to bring chaos to the pitch. There has to be chaos.
Yeah.
And if there's order, that Dublin will.
Yeah, well, that's what they probably want, is just to because to play that kind of algorithmic type of game, just to get through the processes.
Well, Mark O'Shea makes a very interesting point as we bring all this to a close, and we'll move on to the stuff. He says that if they lose the way they did 12 months ago, I don't know if I agree with this because they're so young.
That jumped out at me.
Yeah, he says they're pretty much finished as a group that can win in All-Ireland, and I don't believe Mickey Hart will let that happen. I mean, if they lose like they did 12 months ago, I don't know where they've finished as a group, because they've come back from that last year and they're still young.
It's an interesting one because, after they lost to Monaghan this year, Hart was being absolutely scorched alive above there again, right? In the way that he had been intermittently over the previous 10 years, and even when they were winning All-Irelands. Now it's come around again, and it's almost a messianic thing that he's going to lead us again, and he's going to make this miraculously happen with these changes and switches. But the flip side of it is, if you talk to enough people above there is a sense that, if we get hockeyed, all bets are off again, lads.
Yeah.
Surely you're not suggesting that the Irish sporting public is guilty of being fickle.
No. They're not that kind of people. Tyrone people are.
What sporting public isn't fickle, in fairness. O'Shea, by the way, Mark O'Shea says, look, this is a team for the ages. Cluxton, Cooper, McCarthy, McCaffrey, Fenton, Kilkenny, Mannion. 7 players who'd walk into every kid's fantasy team. That's not to mention Brian Howard, the potential of Owen Merchant, the rock-solid reliability of John Small. The most nerveless kicking boot in football belongs to Dean Rock. Oh, that's not to mention Con O'Callaghan, if he was to emerge like we know he can. Need we say more? And he says, that's not to mention Costello, McMahon, Flynn. Dublin will win because they are simply as good as they appear, is O'Shea's simple logic as well. In terms of feature interviews, there's nothing jumping out, I would say, from a Dublin perspective. Poor Campsey seemed like he was decent value. Mick, you're one of those who spoke to him?
Yeah, it was one of those press day kind of round the chair affairs.
Don't say it like your soul is dying as we speak.
No, it's not. My soul died a long time ago. No, it was just, look, he's a good lad. He was a good lad, and
boxer in his youth.
A boxer in his youth, yeah. It's like any of these group interviews. You kind of just you go and meet them, and then you go from there. You kind of make however calls you can. He was a boxer in his youth, yeah. He was a very good boxer. Boxed out of a Coal Island Clonaux, which had a guy called Frank Irvin, who passed away in the last couple of years. He would have been a very, very good coach. So he would have brought you Conrad Cummings as well, who's boxing at professional level now, very well. So yeah, he had that. I mean, when he got to 16, 17, he kind of had to make a choice whether he went the boxing route or the football route. But they had already seen that if they could get him in to play football at all, he was a leader, and he's been a captain, vice captain for most of his teams up the way, and he's doing a very good job now in terms of man marking and all that sort of stuff. So he's a variety of choices. If it's a man mark today, we'll see who he ends up with.
He's a good one to get today because, say it's Kilkenny, they go after and they put him in Kilkenny. He's a
key player today.
Yeah,
and fair play. And I mean, we're slaves a little bit to this system now, where you fetch up to these media days. And fair play to them for putting a player forward who's a central player in today's game.
I think they put up 5 or 6 players. If you look across the last couple of weeks, there's been 4, definitely 5 voices, and Mickey Hart obviously as well.
And there was just worth mentioning, there was a really good Mickey Hart interview with Kieran Shannon in the Examiner yesterday as well. Really good interview.
Yeah, it was really good. Actually, you know, there were two contrasting pieces on Mickey Hart yesterday, and both in their own right really strong pieces and worth your time. And they were Kieran Shannon with Mickey Hart, and then Ewan McKenna took a totally different slant on Hart and pointed out some misgivings he has with him.
Yeah.
McKenna's in the Business Post today.
Yeah.
Just pointing out again the disparity in spending.
You know, Ewan has been talking for a while about the amount of money that's been pumped into Dublin, and you know how skewed that has made the game. You know, the origins back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
But I mean, I remember a time, you know, when Dublin GA was pretty much a laughingstock.
It was dying. I've had this.
Late 80s, early 90s, it was just...
Like, I think people, you know, it's a never the twain shall meet argument, because, I mean, I've had it with you a few times, or debate, let's call it. Like, I agree that the funding now at this stage obviously needs to be rebalanced and all that.
He's making the point today that even if they do that it's going to take another decade...
Well, it will.
...for that to have any real impact.
Well, it took a decade for the Dublin money to really kick in.
Well, exactly. I mean, and as John says, you just need to go back to 2000 even. Never mind the 80s, 2000.
Yeah.
It was dying. Like, I mean, they couldn't get clubs up and running in places with gigantic communities. Like, I mean, Dublin is such an exceptional case study in GA terms that you have to look at it in a totally different way. And that's not to say that the money that's going in and on, the impact and so on, it's just worked too well. You know what I mean? It's just worked way too well.
We had former president, name escapes me, Sean Kelly on the show. It was literally almost not a year to the day, because the schedule has changed, but the Tuesday after the All-Ireland final with Ewan, and Kelly basically, I'm not quoting him word for word, but effectively said, like, it's almost worked way better than we could have ever imagined.
Yeah.
We were trying to save the game in Dublin, and we've created a monster.
I remember
monster is my word.
I remember asking...
money has nothing to do with the creation of the manager that is Jim Gavin. Yeah. You know, or Hank Gilroy before him, you know, who's been their county football manager, now he's managing their county hurlers. They had John Costello in a full-time position before ever there was money coming into the county. So they have, when you get money is one thing, spending it and investing in people is another thing entirely. And you know, they've had some very smart people do some very smart things. Yeah.
They've used it brilliantly, and I agree totally. Like, this isn't a 20-team league. If it was, then money would really count and Dublin would win because they'd have 45 players to pick from.
Yeah.
This is Champions League-esque knockout. Like, I mean, any team that can put 20 lads together can have a good run for a summer. You're talking 3 or 4 big games.
Like, it was always said
Sean Boylan always used to say that, you know, he would never accept that there aren't 15 players in the league who are as good or better than the 15 best players in Dublin. Yeah. And that's a perfectly simplistic but true argument.
No, but look what McGuinness did in a short space of time in the modern era. Yeah. So it's possible.
I've always said, like, that there's probably 70 to 80% of football counties, let's just say now while we're on about football, underachieving in terms of what they can do, right? And that would be my view on it. For years it was said that Dublin were underachieving, and God help us if they ever achieve.
Yeah.
And now they're actually probably overachieving, but I mean, they've got such a great group of players as well now. And Ewan makes some fantastic points, and it's good to have those figures out there because it makes people think about, okay, what's the money being spent on, where is it going, how can it be spent better, and maybe it needs to be dispersed more. Yeah. But you can't, like, I look at Belfast now, right? And to me, in my head, Belfast is one of the biggest, single most pressing issues for the GA right now. GA in Belfast is nearly dead. There's some brilliant people up there trying to keep it alive, but the bloody thing is nearly dead. And it's different. It's different, obviously, but it wasn't that far off the same kind of crisis talk about Dublin back in the late 90s, early 90s, when they started talking about
there is
Dublin
money starting to go into Belfast.
There is, but it's not the first time it's gone in. And again, it's about what you said, it's about where is it going, is it being spent the right way, and hopefully it's being spent the right way this when again. But anyway, that's another day's work.
No, it's interesting. It's an interesting analogy to bring up. One last question then before we really leave the football. If you were a betting man, would you hazard a guess that over the next 3 decades, in each of those 3 decades, Dublin will at least win, by dint of population and size, they'll at least win 5 All-Irelands out of every 10 years for the next 30? Is it gone that
very
serious?
hard.
No, like
I don't know.
that's doomsday scenario. Is it
I
gone
don't
that
think
bad?
so.
I couldn't see that.
I don't think so either. No.
And like I mean, I come from a county where we're probably never going to win anything. Well, not never, but I mean, with a population.
Not with that attitude, John.
No, that's true. But
Get a sports
There's 15 good
psychologist in there.
footballers.
With a
Listen, there's
population of
15 good footballers
30,000.
in Longford.
With a population of 30,000, it's just that much. It's that
course
much
it
harder.
is, yeah.
But that's not to say, like Longford has won Leinster minor titles, so it's got to under 21s finals and has a decent qualifier record, and with a restructured championship could get to a lot further. You know, whether they're going to win All Ireland's not is another thing.
Yeah.
So population does matter, but that's only the start of it. You've got to organise yourself. You've got to have resources. You've got to have people. You've got to. Have the right
You mentioned
people.
Monaghan this morning. Like Monaghan are the poster boy for this stuff now.
I love Monaghan. They're just
You know?
Monaghan are doing all of this.
Yeah.
You know, they've got a good club
Doing it
game.
well.
They've got a good structure there. They've got good people. They've got a good manager. They're overachieving with a small population. Is it the fourth smallest population in the country?
Well,
Something like that.
Roscommon are doing well too. Like, you know, in relative terms as well. I mean, it's just, you know.
Roscommon always did, and Roscommon are in Connacht, which is, you know, I used to always wonder how many Connacht titles Longford would have won if they were the other side of the Shannon. You know, if it was 28 miles further west than it is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, okay. That is your All-Ireland football final selection in the newspapers. We've got Mick Foley from the Sunday Times and John Greene from the Sunday Independent, sports editor here in studio. We're looking at the Sunday papers. We've looked at Dublin Tyrone build-up. A brief tangent, John, in the Living magazine and the Sunday Independent, you've written a very personal piece. It's 2 years almost to the day since you had a real brush with mortality, not to put too fine a point on it.
Yeah, it's just a coincidence that piece happens to go in today. The Friday before the hurling final, which would have been this weekend 2 years ago, I got a pain in my side, which I ignored for 6 days as best I could until I couldn't ignore it anymore, and I presented myself in A&E, and then from there it all went the world went crazy for a few weeks.
Yeah.
But,
a tear in your aorta was
I had
you weren't expecting.
I was after doing a half marathon the week before and was flying fit, and was actually just sitting at home on a Friday night writing that weekend's column when it happened.
Right.
Basically, it's called an aortic dissection, and there was an aneurysm tied into it. So, went under the knife and had a rough few weeks getting back on my feet.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things that kind of creeps up on you and you don't see it happening. You know, you're fit and flying, and then the next thing you're on your back.
You talk about the recovery, and that one of the trickiest things on the road to recovery is not just the physical side of things, but one, trying to rationalise why it might have happened, and then two, feeling vulnerable, feeling fragile afterwards. That's one of the things in the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's one of those, you know, that piece was on my mind for a long time, and, you know, I more or less said I'd never write it, and then...
Why?
I just didn't think, and I'm still not sure, even now that it's in the paper, I'm still not sure, but I just didn't know if I want to put it out there, because, you know, I'm not the only person that's had an experience, like a frightening experience like that. And so you don't know, everybody reacts differently to it, and some people react, you know, come back much quicker than others, but I would have thought that something many people who have it have in common is just wondering how did it, you know, why me is the question I ask, like why me, what did I do? And it was just a sort of a chance meeting with a poker player, which is what I refer to today, in Monte Carlo of all places, and talking to her about poker, and she told me that her attraction to poker was that you can have 5 cards, and you can, or they play, it was Texas Hold'em, you know, so you can have your cards, the public cards and the private cards, and you take the private cards and you play them as well as those cards can be played. Couldn't be played any better. Do everything right, make all the right decisions on each round, and still lose. And how the human brain finds that really difficult to deal with, that you do everything right and you still lose, and then the sense of sort of starting to question things. And, you know, she even said this is where religion comes into, and we're always looking for a reason for something. And that got me thinking that, you know, yeah, she's right. You know, there are some times that you do things, make all the right decisions. Like, I was healthy, I was fit, I was, you know, was in good shape, and still something bad can happen, and maybe going up blind alleys looking for reasons as to why that might have happened.
Yeah, Maria Konnikova is the poker.
Yeah, she's a writer, and
she says something which I couldn't agree more. I mean, she says, my least favourite sentence in the world is things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
She says, when anyone says that, I want to wring their neck.
Yeah.
And if there was no other reason that it may have happened, it might be just to stop people saying when things happen, things only happen for a reason.
I mean, I've heard it said afterwards that some people says, I knew all that running was going to catch up with him in the end. It was way too healthy for his life.
Yeah, I'm sensing that there's a degree of privacy here, but it's a fine piece and it's worth reading. And I mean, the striking thing for me is where you talk about being on the operation table about to go in, and it's in those moments you say your worst fears haunt you, your failures, the things you've left unsaid or undone, before finally a strange sort of calm descends.
Yeah, I haven't asked anyone else about this, and I was conscious of that when I was writing it. I haven't asked other people who have been. I remember I spoke to Michael Lester once. He had his scare around sometime around the same time, but we skirted around it really. But I haven't asked other people what they feel, and it was only afterwards I was struck by the fact that I was thinking about the stuff that I'd messed up or stuff that I hadn't done. And again, it was that part of the human condition in that moment that you don't think about all the good things, that have happened in your life. Why was I so fixated on stuff that I had done wrong or stuff that I hadn't got round to doing?
That's an interesting point, actually. Yeah, because there's the book by the palliative care nurses, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, where they chart what everyone's done over the 20 years of talking to people about to pass on and their top 5 regrets, and invariably it's things like working too hard and losing touch with friends. I don't think there is a book saying top 5 things I'm happy about. It's always the regrets, actually. Yeah.
It's gas, like just when you were talking there, and it's good to see this man back up and running. Actually, the last time I think we were above in Clones one evening watching Kerry Monaghan, and you were racing away to go swimming or something.
I just was looking at the sun, and I just said, I need to get a sea. I need to get to the sea. So I left Clones and I took a back way out, and I made it to the sea before it got dark.
Yeah, that was good. But it's interesting just when you were saying about being conscious about writing and stuff. I always think it's an interesting thing, like when you're a career journalist, and your job is to elicit insight from other people. Yet we have this sort of almost natural aversion to the word I, and writing about ourselves and things that happen to us when, journalists are people like everybody else, and they have experiences like everybody else, and then sometimes it's really good and really helpful to share those experiences with other people, and you're like, of course, it's like everything where, these kind of episodes have happened to lots of other people, but then lots of other people like to see that it's happened to someone else too, and they like to see it shared, and that their experiences is shared, and it's got to help.
It does, yeah. Have you reverted to? Do you still have lots of unsaid things and undone things, or are you a new person in the last 2 years?
I'm not a new person. No, I'm still the same person.
Yeah. It hasn't
I think that's the best way of.
It hasn't changed your modus operandi. I mean.
No, it hasn't hugely. No, that's one of the things that I have thought about. Does it? You get this thing. You must have given you a whole new perspective. No, it didn't. Once I was up and running and fit to get back to work again, I went back to work, and yeah.
Life takes over, doesn't it?
Yeah, life gets in the way again.
It does. It does seem to. It's funny. Martin O'Neill was on the show in the last week, and he mentioned his wife's illness, Geraldine, and horrific time. Obviously left Celtic at the time to care for her, and then I said he didn't want to talk about it, very understandably, but the simple question was, did it change you, or do you revert to all your old habits and all your old traits and way of going about things? And he was like, you completely revert. Once it's over, you go back exactly to making the same silly mistakes you make.
Yeah, I think you could be potentially very irritating if it kind of had that kind of, road to Damascus impact on you, you know what I mean? Just a little bit, but...
Yeah.
I was sitting beside a guy at a dinner one time, about a year ago, I think, and I'd never met him before, and I haven't met him since. And he was one of these people who just blew me away. He was telling me he hardly ever sleeps. He finds going to bed to be a real intrusion on his day, so he does it as little as possible. He goes to bed as late as he can, and he gets up as early as he can. And I said, why would you do that? And he said, I'm afraid I'm going to miss something. There's just too much out there, and I have too much that I want to do, and I certainly don't want to be wasting it lying in bed. And I was kind of still in my recovery at that stage, and I was listening to him, and I was going, God, that's really, I don't know whether I'm jealous or angry with you, but you know, I just thought he was fascinating.
Wow.
And he had such an attitude to life, and he had so many different things that he was doing, and he was raising a young family as well, and his wife was there, and I was saying, is he really doing that? And she said, no, that's what he's like. Yeah.
Wow, God bless him.
I thought, what a fantastic outlook, you know.
Fair play to him. As a man with 3 small kids at home, I can tell you, every nap is an adornment on every day. Let me tell you. But
the old motto: "You sleep when they sleep."
Yeah. But I respect his his convictions.
Fantastic, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, that's in the living section of the Sunday Independent, John. People can read that there, page 12 and 13. Thanks. 2 years and counting. Keep it going.
Thanks.
So, a few other bits and pieces before we go. We're not going to have as much time as we would like, but certainly Mayo is a theme across a lot of papers today, and Declan Rice is a theme across a lot of papers today. If we jump in at Rice for a change of tack, because maybe there's non-GA fans listening going, come on. So, the most interesting thing I read on all the Declan Rice stuff, look, a lot of the opinions are not overly new, but Philip Quinn, page 82, and it's almost somewhat buried, which is
and Paul Rowan touches on it as well.
Yeah.
The suggestion that there's more to this, it's very kind of in the background suggestion, and
well, I think what got a lot of people thinking, Virgin, almost TV3, Virgin Media released on social media, and it was on the TV, I'm sure as well, Brian Kerr and Keith Andrews talking to Tommy.
Yeah.
And Kerr just said, and we could be reading way too much into this, and Brian could be listening right now going, whoa, don't put words in my mouth. But Kerr just said a few times, this has changed so dramatically, I hope something hasn't happened. And there was a weight there, as in grams and kilograms, a weight that I hope something hasn't happened. And he said it a few times.
Definitely with Philip's piece in the Mail and Paul's piece in the Sunday Times, they're definitely writing around something.
They are.
Well, you can kind of tread.
There was an argument in the camp that didn't directly involve, or there's a suggestion that there was an argument in the camp in which Rice wasn't involved directly.
Yeah. Well, it's
which he may have become wrapped up in.
It's on record. Martin O'Neill put it on record that there were, quote, altercations was the word he used with Roy Keane and both Harry Arter and Jonathan Walters. Yeah. That is on record. That is irrefutable. What Philip adds to the story here in the Mail on Sunday is what we do know, says Philip, is that there was verbal sparring involving Roy Keane, 2 other players, Harry Arter and Jonathan Walters, prior to the trip to Paris to play France. This is what we didn't realise. Rice was close by when Keane exchanged words with Arter in the team hotel. This paper understands Rice got involved as a peacemaker. Whatever happened then or what was said is not known. But he says Rice's performances against France and the USA were unaffected, and he was Ireland's best player both times. I mean, how does Roy Keane react to a peacemaker getting involved might be a question. Now, there could be nothing in this, and after the USA game, Rice still talked about how delighted he was with the whole setup, so we could be making too much of this.
It depends who's talking to. It depends how these things are being framed for him by other people, like, you know what I mean? I mean, it could well be that, and again, this is such ridiculous speculation. You know, I mean, but anyway, like, it could be that someone said, well, look, here's your choice, Declan. You know, I mean, you can go into the apparent calm of the England camp if you get to that level, or you can go back to what looks like a fairly volatile situation. I mean, do you want to be a peacemaker at 19 years of age in the middle of this thing? You know, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, we were saying outside, like, I mean, you know, look, it's money and identity here are getting mixed up together.
When money and identity become confused, it's a tricky one.
Yeah.
Like Kevin Kilban in the Mail and you know, on Twitter and here has been very black and white about identity. I think he's a very good column in the Mail today, and I think his closing point is a very good one. You know, he's taken Jack Grealish and Declan Rice together and said that they played underage for Ireland. They took places from people who may have had a commitment to Ireland that they may not have. Well, Jack Grealish doesn't have a commitment to Ireland now, and we don't know about Rice. But the quotes from O'Neill, you know, about his father. If you met his father,
Sean,
you'd know, you'd understand. And he's got is it Paul Rowan's piece that mentions about the caps hanging on the wall and the jerseys hanging on.
Yeah, they live near each other.
I don't even have mine hanging on the wall.
O'Neill visited the house.
I don't know. There's a stench from this one that's just a little bit hard to ignore.
It kind of sounds like, you know, I mean, his father clearly wants to play for Ireland. Maybe he plays for Ireland. He's so proud of what he's done, and maybe I don't know how close he is to his dad, but, like, you know, maybe he's really just energised by the fact that he's done this for his dad and all the rest of it. Now the dust has settled a little bit, and they're going, right, okay, what's next? England have got to a World Cup semi-final, and he's been talked up in relation to maybe the future as a player for England in the next 4 to 5 years. Who knows?
Yeah.
You know, who knows? But I think, as a general point, I think as Irish people, and given our history and our current history and everything else, I think we need to be quite cautious and easygoing, a little bit more relaxed about identity and what constitutes being Irish. I think
I think a lot of people involved in soccer in Northern Ireland would be kind of looking at this debate down here with a wry smile.
Absolutely.
And Scotland as well.
And Scotland, yeah. Absolutely.
Gareth Southgate's spoken. He says, "It's fair to say I have spoken with Declan. I've promised him nothing because I don't think that's right." This is Southgate speaking yesterday. Philip has this in the back page of the Mail. "Can't promise players who are with us at the World Cup they'll be involved in 6 months. So why would I promise that to a young player? I think that would be unethical."
Yeah.
Which is very fair, and he says, "I think let's just leave him be and make his own decision. The boy's in a really difficult position. I'm extremely conscious of that." So Gareth Southgate being even-handed and fair.
Paul has those as well, so I presume that was some kind of a collective thing.
Eamon Sweeney kind of, I think it's a fair point to make. Like, we are going after these players across Scotland and the UK at large and saying, "Come and play for Ireland." And
it's an absolute policy.
Absolutely.
That we're doing this.
So it can't be unexpected that when they reach maturity, they might say, "Well, hang on, now I have to think about this." He says, essentially, says Eamon Sweeney, "Ireland tried to play a kind of con trick, trapping them in our colours forever before they could get away. We have no grounds for complaint. The problem with our dependence on players with Irish grandparents," and he says in brackets, "and how tenuous a link is that when you think of it, is that it functions as a kind of get-out clause that prevents the FAI from fully concentrating on the development of homegrown talent." And he says one reason for the ferocity of the reaction to Grealish and Rice's supposed treachery is that Irish fans know deep down that most of the English-born players who declare for us do so because they're not good enough to win an English cap.
And we've always accepted that.
I think we know that. Yeah.
I mean, 88, 1994, there was a bit of that. So we've always accepted that, and that's what I think. What Mick's point is a good one. We just need to be very careful about our moralising around this particular one, because if you're going to have this policy that we clearly have, and I heard somebody talking on radio about it during the week who seems to know a lot about what we're doing on the ground in England, then we're going to basically have to accept that we're going to win some and we're going to lose some, and that it is that cynical.
And the whole notion of eligibility now, even at senior level, is a bit more convoluted than it was 20, 30 years ago, when if you played for Ireland in a friendly, that was it. Whereas now it depends what kind of friendly it is.
Well, there's nothing,
so it's
there's nothing straightforward about
people
identity.
are aware of that maybe too.
There's nothing straightforward about identity, but none of us three grew up in a different country, so we can't really. But my two first cousins grew up in English, and I grew up in England and always felt absolutely Irish until they moved back here in their teens. But that's them, and everybody is different, and everybody has a different environment. And there's been people who've played for England before and playing for England now who have English connections.
Yeah,
I think the bigger onus here is on rule makers, and it applies to rugby as well. And we're starting to see it in Olympic sports as well. We're starting to see people from English-born people or American-born people swimming or running for Ireland or whatever. So there is an issue around international sport and eligibility, and I can't understand how somebody can play 3 senior international friendlies and still have a get-out-of-jail card. I can't understand that.
And to be fair, I'd be very slow to criticise Rice, but if he had doubts, he probably had those same doubts before the 3 friendlies. He really should have maybe held off before doing that. But
I get the impression.
I agree with you. I'm slow to criticise him as well.
I wouldn't criticise him at all,
because he's grown up in an environment of professional sport.
It's very difficult.
It's different.
And this goes back to our core point again. I mean, he may have grown up in a house of Irishness at home, but now he's living and working in a professional environment where you maximise your income whatever way you can, and you maximise your income clearly by playing for England instead of Ireland if you have the choice.
And sporting identity is such a tricky. We're lucky in Ireland in a way that because we kind of have a type of sporting identity because of the GA, where we have this parish and county thing. So we have a very strong understanding of what identity means. And we sometimes take that and impose that in other cultures where identity isn't quite the same thing.
Differently,
it's perceived differently. The idea that you have one club for life or one county for life.
I mean, on a practical level, and it's kind of echoed in all the pieces about Rice, is that the FAI need to look at their youth structures and, you know, in terms of how and where and in what way are they.
But we also have to
forward
accept
young
that
players.
that if we want to have a successful international team in a lot of sports, there's going to have to be an element of looking at the Irish diaspora to bolster that we're not going to produce enough here.
No.
Across a multitude of sports.
No, it certainly seems that way. We're reviewing the Sunday papers. We're pretty much coming to a close. It's been brought to you at Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. We've about 8, 9, 10 minutes here. So, very quickly, Mayo's in the pages, but I think it'd be crazy not to touch on, we're talking 8,000 words plus. John, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of the big read in the paper. In the Sunday Independent today is Paul Kimmage's piece with maybe with John McHenry, the former Irish golfer, and I don't know how you distill it down into a few bon mots, but
that's why I threw that curveball to you. You're the sports editor. Sum up his 8,000 word piece.
You did it pretty well.
What I was going to say, that as the sports editor, that it would be a conflict for me, and I was going to say to Mick to
sum it
came to
up.
it fresh. Look, in a nutshell, look, because you know I've lived with this story for a while. John McHenry, a lot of people will know who he is. He was a former professional golfer. He himself, you know, would say he was a bit of a journeyman pro. But most of us would know him as, you know, having been the director of golf at the K Club during the Ryder Cup when they did such a brilliant job with the course, despite the hurricane that ripped through it, and as a very knowledgeable broadcaster.
Often on RTE during their golf coverage. So
John invented a game which is basically, I suppose, a T20 of golf. It was a 6-hole format to be born out of what he saw as being a problem that golf has that is there, which is the amount of time that it takes to play it versus the amount of time that the modern man or woman has in their daily life, and also that the game was losing its appeal to a younger audience. And in the same way that T20 has revitalised cricket a little bit, he devised this 6-game format. He took it to the European Tour, and what happened next is what this story is about. It's about 8,500 words. It's just over 2 pages of broadsheet, so that is a big commitment and it's a big read. But if
I was to sum it up, it would seem that things were progressing quite nicely, and then towards the crunch point, it seems the European Tour sat him down and said, "Look, we're gonna go our own way on this," and he was obviously very upset about that. Felt that was totally wrong, and I mean, I don't have the business acumen to know if he has been screwed here, and if he has, how badly he's been screwed here. I don't know enough about business and copyright and what is an agreement and what's not. But Dermot Desmond, who's very much behind him and was a friend and thought the idea was great and put up money for it and everything.
I'm not sure he put up money. I don't know if that's...
He offered to fund a trial.
He offered to fund the trial,
yeah. So he was very invested in it in that sense. And when Pelly told McHenry at Wentworth that they were going to go their own way, then Dermot Desmond was there. We sat down, Pelly goes straight into it. "Look, we're thinking of doing this now by ourselves. I'm not going to tell you the format now because realistically we should have a non-disclosure agreement for that." And I'm listening, says McHenry, thinking, what the F? He said Pelly had to go out of the room then to make a presentation. Dermot went after him, and when he came back he said, "John, I've just had a chat with Keith and I've told him he can't just copy and paste from your project and call it his own. That would be morally and ethically wrong."
Yeah, I think that's the key.
That's it.
That is the key line. I mean, you know, there is now a game called Golf Sixes.
There is,
Yeah.
Seems to be doing well. It's been just over a year, and the contention is that nobody had thought about this, and then John McHenry comes with this idea and he brings it to the European Tour, and he's been frozen out.
It's just it's really a shocking story. And I mean, I think the theme, certainly through the first third of it, is golf is a game of honour. Golf is a game of honour, and you know, that seems to be the sort of underlying basic principle for a game that is so based on kind of, you know, the unwritten rules or whatever, and the ethics of the whole thing, that maybe this is sort of going directly against the ethic of anything, you know. But it's just such a unfortunate story. And I mean, I remember, like, you know, even just from a human point of view, like, I can remember growing up, you know, buying the Cork Examiner or whatever, Cork Examiner come in every day, and John McHenry was constantly winning as an amateur, and Walker Cup, I see Paul recalls it in '87, and Like he would have been a sort of a regular in your sporting memory as a kid. My sporting memory, he would have been a very regular kind of presence, And it's just, he was always a man of great honour and great integrity.
There's a story at the start that he tells about, when he was young, as a teenager, and about to win his first senior club competition, and he called a penalty on himself that nobody had seen, playing with his dad, and he lost the tournament by a stroke. And his dad said he'd never been prouder of him than he was.
It's a tough situation because, he says had his ups and downs in business, and he kind of finishes off by being very honest and saying, look, I'm 54, my golf consultancy business is struggling, I've applied for jobs in golf management here and abroad, I'm told I'm overqualified. Someone will have to explain that to me. He says, you start questioning yourself, why me? Have I done something wrong? Am I a bad person? And I know I'm not. I'm not a leech. I didn't go to Pelly saying I wanted a job, I want you to pay for everything. I just said this is a great opportunity and I wanted to be treated fairly. So I guess you wish him well. It's worth a read.
It's
we're not seeing many 8,000 word pieces in many papers. It's clearly something, and you have Dermot Crowe doing a big piece as well. It's clearly something you feel is very important. I wanted to talk to you more about being a sports editor, but it's such a busy day. You might do it the next time you're in. But that is certainly one of the signatures of the paper you produce, which is that you're getting long form stuff.
Yeah, well, the world has changed, and we've always had the scope to do that because we're broadsheet, and we have 14 or 16 or 18 pages every week. But the world has changed so much that how people consume what we produce in our business, be it what you're doing on radio or on television or what we're doing in newspapers, is different. And the challenge is to get them to see what we're doing and to believe in what we're doing, and not to just take it lightly. So when you have a commitment like to that piece, that piece didn't just come about. That piece came about because Paul is out and about. He's not sitting behind a desk, he's not in an office. He heard about that story at a European Tour event earlier this year. I'm not sure when it was, but it was in the spring sometime. So it has taken from then until today to get that piece into the paper as it is today. He needs the time to be able to investigate it properly, because you can't just go putting stuff in a paper. It has to be properly researched, it has to be investigated, everybody has to be spoken to, and it has to be put together. And if you make that sort of a commitment to a story, then you must give it the room so the story can be properly told. And there's a lengthy reply from the European Tour to questions that we put in, and we carried that reply in full because we owed them the opportunity to give their side of the story.
And they defend themselves,
If you get to have an interview, as Paul had in the past with Rory McIlroy or whoever, or Dermot Crowe went down to Limerick a few weeks ago and spent a few days with the team, I think you need to let that breathe and you need to give it the room. And these are talented writers. Like, one of the things we're blessed with in Ireland, and I've always said this, I've talked to you before about this, Mick, we've a fantastic tradition of sports writing in this country.
And do you care if down the line over the next 5 years there's analytics for pieces which are read online? We know how long people spend, we know if people reach the bottom. Yeah. So do you care do you know what the percentage of people is who finish these long form pieces, and do you care if it's as small as, I'll pluck a number, 10%?
I don't know how many finish.
And would you care?
Yeah, you would, You'd like to think that, this stuff isn't cheap. It costs money to produce this content. So you'd like to think that people are finishing it. I do know with our longer pieces, obviously I'm a dinosaur, so what I want to do is to have these long pieces in the paper, and then everybody goes out to the shop and buys the paper and reads it. But that's not happening. People are going to read it online. Stuff like that won't go up online today, or might go up tonight or tomorrow. But we do know when we have these pieces that the engagement time with them online is longer than standard pieces. So people are reading them. I've always argued that the sporting audience is a really intelligent audience. There can be a tendency to treat them as if they're, not, and that you need to present everything. But sporting audience, especially in Ireland, with newspapers and media, are very engaged and very intelligent, and you have to treat them that way. And if you produce stuff for them to read that is well written, that's well researched, that's been given time, that has colour, that has information, that has entertainment in it, it will be read, whether that's in the paper itself or whether it's... The equivalent of it is when you do something like your road shows, like the one you did in Croke Park last week, which I caught good bits of it. Like some of the stuff, when people get time to talk, Kieran McGeaney gets time to talk, or Jim McGinnis when he gets time to talk, really interesting to listen to. So it's the same concept on paper where you give people time and room to talk.
Which makes it difficult for me now to say we're out of time. But we pretty much are. We didn't get to the Mayo stuff, but I dare say we may come back to Mayo on the pay per view over the next
we all love Mayo
year, between David Brady and Tommy Conlon and Mick Foley and Mick Clifford as well. People are writing about Mayo. Clandestine was the word used about the Mayo County Board.
Just a lack of... I think there's just, as someone said to me in Mayo during the week, in this age of, superhuman communication, like where you can literally communicate with people like that, two guys living up the road from each other didn't talk for a couple of months, and if they had, they probably wouldn't be here now,
Yeah.
It's pretty long the short of it.
Yeah. Okay. Mick Foley from the Sunday Times and John Greene from the Sunday Independent. Thanks, lads. Appreciate it.
Thanks, too.